The Carolina Hurricanes have always had these marketing slogans. The last couple of seasons, the tagline has been, "Take warning." But back in the day, they had one that I thought was brilliant. "You'll know when you go." You got to remember, in the early days of hockey here in this market, the argument was, don't watch it on TV, just go to the arena. You will be hooked on the speed and physicality of the game. And for the most part, it worked. But here's the thing. We tend to forget that there was already a group of hardcore hockey fans because they did know. They did go to Dorton Arena to see the Raleigh IceCaps, an East Coast Hockey League team that was brought to the Triangle in 1991.
The Raleigh IceCaps haven't played their first game, and they don't have any players, but they think they'll have fans come November.
There's a tremendous amount of hockey interest here, people that are transplanted, of course, but a lot of people that are like myself, homegrown here that have just happened to see a hockey game or two and really fell in love with it.
Today, the IceCaps named former NHL player Kurt Kleinendorst head coach. Kleinendorst thinks hockey will catch on here in Raleigh.
It's fast-paced, it's up and down, there's a lot of skill involved.
The IceCaps will join the East Coast Hockey League featuring Greensboro here and Winston-Salem. The IceCaps will skate in some fast company.
They're unbelievable athletes. I've been involved in baseball for a long time, but the athletic ability of these kids are just unbelievable. They come out of college, they come out of the junior program in Canada, which is tremendous. So basically this is AA hockey.
And the first game in Dorton Arena is just 5 months away. Bob Holliday, WRAL TV5 Sports.
The IceCaps didn't win any titles, any divisions, or anything like that, but they did win the hearts of fans and, most importantly, pave the way for the NHL to move here.
The Triangle has the most unique landscape for sports. 3 major universities along Tobacco Road with rabid fan bases, a Stanley Cup champion, an NFL team right down the road, and heavily invested transplants. Not to mention an interesting mix of sports teams that were. Joe Ovies brings you a brief history of Triangle sports, a candid conversation with those who help shape why sports matters here.
I think we can all agree, despite the Canadian media's best efforts, that making jokes about hockey in the South are pretty stale. But back in 1991, were they fresh and people loved making them. But here's the thing, despite all the snarky comments about hockey in this area, it's always proven to be successful, including the first season of the Raleigh IceCaps.
A typical capacity crowd on a hockey Saturday night. The Raleigh IceCaps have had an incredible beginning these past few years. Who would have thought a cold weather sport would be such a hit in our Sunbelt community?
How did you get to be such a big IceCaps fan?
I love Wild Goose.
Why do you come to see hockey? Why do you like IceCaps hockey?
Because I play it.
You play it? What position?
Left wing.
What's your favorite thing about hockey? You like to score? You like to save them? What's your job?
Check.
Many IceCaps fans, perhaps even most, are non-purists. They like the pugilists, or put more simply,
Fights. Fights.
Fights.
Fights? Are you serious?
Yes.
Oh, how'd you get to be a fight fan?
My brother.
there are also the hockey connoisseurs. They'll take a good slap shot over a cheap shot any night.
I like hockey. It's not the fights, it's the hockey game that I came to see.
They do a good job. There's really a lot of good skating down here, and the IceCaps are a good team.
Hockey's the fastest sport in the world, and you'll see that here. Like my friend said, we have great skaters.
And that's reflected in the ECHL standings. The IceCaps have been on top of the East from the beginning and are showing no signs of letting up. Neither are their fans.
This is the only game in town.
Rick Sullivan, WRAL TV5 Sports.
Jim Powers was part of that original IceCaps squad. He ended up being team captain later on in his career. But overall, his story is very similar to the story of hockey in the Triangle. It's new, you fall in love with it, and then you want to stick around. You graduate from college.
Yeah.
You enter into this free agent pool. You're just trying to find a place to play. What was your familiarity with Raleigh, North Carolina? what was your understanding of what the ECHL was going to be like? How did you end up here?
Absolutely blind to what Raleigh was, where it was, and had no idea I was going to end up here. Literally left college. I played for the World University teams, the USA team. I played over in Sapporo, Japan.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 2-week big ordeal, and then from there I got to go to camp with Minnesota. And from Minnesota, I ended up at a camp in Bourne, Cape Cod area, and met Kurt Kleinendorf there.
Okay.
Wasn't going anywhere. Didn't have any contracts. Wasn't just trying to get a play somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So he offered me to come to Raleigh, and literally I didn't know where Raleigh was. Like this was 30 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So, and I'm like, sure, great, let's go. Like so. Did a little research and found out where it was. And, again, Kurt was the sell. There was no other. I mean, he was a great guy. He played at Providence College, just getting in coaching himself.
Mm-hmm.
So he was recruiting for his first time. I'm trying to get there for my first time. We just kind of hit it off and, ended up here. I remember driving my 280ZX down 95 and getting here. I'm
nice.
Like, okay, I'm here.
Nice.
Like, here we go. And
95 to 40.
Yeah, it was just straight shot, and I think I slept in a parking lot on my way down here because it was too long to drive straight through. So I just pulled over. I got tired. I'm like, all right. And again, I had a 280ZX. I had my life belongings in it, and there wasn't a lot. So it's like, here's my hockey bag, my sticks, and some clothes, and another hockey bag, and that was it.
So Kurt's getting his start. You're getting your start.
Yep.
And Raleigh is getting its start.
Raleigh's getting its start.
Because that's the other part about
Totally.
this with the IceCaps. You are introducing a market that had come up with basketball.
Yes.
To a certain extent, college football.
Yeah.
You're teaching them or introducing a game in which there is no familiarity. There are no sheets of ice really other than recreational ice skating to go on a date.
We had Dorton Arena, and we had the Ice House in Cary.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Jeez.
And that was our practice facility because the fair came in. We were out of the building for almost 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was week 2. We're like, we're already out of the building. Like, where are we going?
You were dealing with the same issues the Canes always deal with when they have to go on the road in October?
100%.
That's funny.
100%.
That's
Still
funny.
doing it. And again, we'd ride up to the Cary Ice House, which was as big as this office. You're like, what the heck is going on here? Where am I?
I was going to say, my younger son actually plays house league in that
rink.
On that sheet of ice.
Yeah.
There's actually an old 850 The Buzz sticker still there on the where the DJ booth is.
You could, and that was the funny part. Like, you could literally stick your stick up and you're hitting the ceiling in that building.
You
But
really
again,
can.
for skating in the rink, and that rink was great because you're 2 strides and you're at the other end. It was great. It's like done.
So what are you thinking here? I mean, you grew up in a hockey area. Hockey is your life.
Yep.
And you're in this town that has no familiarity with hockey and 2 sheets of ice, and you're playing in an arena that's not necessarily built for hockey either. So what are you thinking?
Well, it was great the first couple of weeks in Dorton Arena. When you get in the locker room with the guys, and every guy will tell you you find out real quick, is this a fit for me or not?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you get along with, and we had great guys here. I mean, we had the guys I played against in college, we ended up being teammates. Todd Person and Stevie Mirabli and some of these guys who were here the first go-around. It was just fun. Like, we're extending our college life right now was what we did, basically, in the beginning.
Okay.
But we're also introducing hockey to the area and all that stuff. So it was fun. I mean, the educational part was unbelievable with talking to people about hockey, and it was great. But, there was very little knowledge in this area, very little.
How much are you getting paid a week?
Oh, not a lot. Not a lot. First year, maybe $400 a week.
Oh, geez.
That's probably on the higher end.
Okay.
Second and third year, because I was under contract with Hartford, I got paid through Hartford. So, which again, the way it works, it opened up a little more money for the other guys. So anytime you got a contract guy in, it was great. It was a bonus because other guys would get paid a little bit more. But
this is where the Booster Club came into play, right?
They were the best.
So for people who might not understand this concept, if I say Booster Club, you associate that with high school athletics.
Yeah.
You associate that with college athletics through the Alumni Fund or like the Wolfpack Club, the Rams Club, the Iron Dukes, those types of things. But a minor league hockey team also had the equivalent of a Booster Club. What was that about? How did that help you?
Just a group of people. probably the nicest people I ever met in Raleigh. They were so kind, and they opened up their homes to us. They had us to their house for cookouts. They'd meet the bus and bring food for the bus for the guys, and just wonderful, wonderful people. I'm still friends with quite a few of them still today.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and, some of them had some hockey knowledge. Most didn't, but they were into it. They loved it. They took us in as family. And it was, again, when you say part of being in Raleigh, that was like the first time I think I've ever had a booster club. And I'm like, this is cool, right? This is fun.
There's an element of college mentality carrying over. I mean, we still see that with the Hurricanes today, with the tailgating culture and how the crowd can react to things and whatnot. But I guess that was still evident back in 1991.
Yep.
Now, Dorton is not made for hockey.
No.
Dorton's not made for a lot of things,
No.
honestly. It is an amazing building architecturally.
Yes.
To me, it is a Raleigh landmark. It should be upgraded. I would love it if NC State was able to pour money into Dorton Arena, upgrade it for college hockey.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily meant for hockey for a variety of reasons.
No.
You're playing a Sunday afternoon game, and the sun's coming through those windows on its way down. I'm guessing there are some sections on that sheet of ice that were not favorable.
No, there was puddles. There was puddles everywhere.
Okay.
We didn't do a lot of afternoon games, and I think part of that might have been because of that. Like 7 o'clock games are fine for the most part until you get into March, as you know. But it wasn't terrible. It was soft, but it wasn't the end of the world.
Okay, but what about fog? Because that's the other thing about North Carolina.
Yeah.
There's no air conditioning. It's not climate controlled. You can't adjust to the situation.
No.
And even though it's November, November in Massachusetts, it's cold.
Different. Yeah.
November here, you don't know what you're getting. It
Yeah.
could be a warm day in November, and I saw some old footage on WRAL, and I know that I put it out on social media. But how did you play in that?
Yeah, so it's funny you bring the fog up because it happened often, and we'd be in the middle of a period, and all of a sudden refs would blow the whistle, and everybody on the ice, both teams, and do 4 or 5 laps, get the fog going up in the air, and it raise up to the ceiling, and then we drop the puck again, and 15, 20 minutes later, whistle blows again, let's move it again. So, yeah, it was an ongoing battle. But it was funny. Again, it was part of being in the ECHL. It's one of the things that you laugh about.
Yeah.
It was a great league. And it's a really, really good league now. And, again, we were just getting going on the coast. And, it was established, but it was the first time here. So it was a learning curve for everybody.
We in a previous episode of this podcast, we focused on the Raleigh Bullfrogs, the Global Basketball Association team that lasted one season.
Yeah.
And the reason why it lasted one season, well, one of the many reasons why it only lasted a season is because it shared space with you at Dorton Arena. So I talked to Chris Corciani, who played that one season with the Bullfrogs. I got his perspective on slippery courts because of all of the conditions inside Dorton Arena not being conducive to ice and basketball courts and everything else. How did that affect you with the changing over or practice time and things like that?
Didn't really affect us at all because when the wood came up, the Zam would do the ice, and it was a little soft, but it's more practice time for us.
Okay.
But as far as affecting our basketball skills from a hockey team perspective, we were horrible, and we found that out pretty quick when we'd go out there and try to run with these guys.
Oh, wait a minute. See, Chris didn't tell me this. You guys would actually try to just play pickup?
We'd go out there, and we're not basketball players, so it was a contact basketball game, and we were terrible, right? So and it was. I mean, there were some spots on that floor where condensation came through, but yeah, it was a wrestling match basketball game.
Did you try to get those guys on skates?
No. I had Solarte on skates though.
Okay, shout out to Mike Solarte.
Yeah, Solarte was absolutely hilarious. He's actually gotten really good now, but
Solarte will show up in those.
Oh yeah, I see him out there, still doing it. But I swear, I think it was one of his first go-arounds when we had him out there, and it was comical.
Solarte is not a small man.
No.
So seeing him on skates is quite a spectacle.
He's a big man on skates,
but he's got some graceful moves.
He does. Tell you one of the funniest things I remember about coming to Dorton Arena. So I'm from Springfield, and we have the Big E, and there's a Coliseum there. So the buildings are pretty similar. And we played in the Coliseum, which is an old horse type building where they show the horses and they do the jumping on equestrian stuff. So I felt comfortable in Dorton Arena because I grew up playing junior hockey in Springfield in another arena with the Picks. So, but the thing about here is we get out to practice the first couple of weeks, and it's a glass building.
Mm-hmm.
We're shooting pucks.
Oh, jeez. Knocks them out?
Probably 100 windows.
Oh, jeez.
And guys after practice were doing it on purpose. Like teeing pucks up at center ice, turn the blade over, slap shot, out into the parking lot. So finally they put the net system up. And again, it's one of those things like nobody thought about the windows. And
nobody thought about it.
You know, the goalie kicks one up, tips it in the corner.
Yeah, and the state is running the arena. They probably that's taxpayer money, man.
I know. I felt horrible. But again, young kid out of college, that's was
coming out the ag budget.
That was fun at the time, but now you think back, you should pay it back for crying out loud.
Come on now. So you look, if a lot of guys will bounce around, and you had a brief stint in the AHL with the Springfield Indians. You're going back to your hometown.
That's my hometown, yeah.
To play hockey.
Yeah.
But I'm on HockeyDB.com, and your entire career essentially is spent with the Raleigh IceCaps.
Yep.
Why?
Well, so when you get here and our first year, I think we went through 300 players, right? So you're like, okay, I'm here. That's good. Like, so you stay in the moment, but the area for me was wonderful.
Okay.
I went back up and had a 2-month stint up in Springfield, which was great, my hometown, but I wasn't playing.
Okay.
So I went to Bruce Landon and said, hey, listen, a guy by the name of Nevin Marquardt walks in, who just got cut from Boston or somewhere. I'm like, yeah, I'm out of here.
Fair.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm like, all right. So I called Bruce and we have a talk, and he wants to send me to Louisville.
Okay,
that's their affiliate. I'm like, no, I got to go to Raleigh. He goes, why? I go, it's just the best place. I mean, you've got to go there and understand it. But people, I mean, the nicest people. Again, I'm coming from Massachusetts, so to come into this culture and this, everything was an easy pace. Nobody got mad. Everything was wonderful.
People were just there to be entertained.
So nice, yeah.
Sure.
But nice, like you go to the grocery store and everybody's just nice to you. It's like it was a whole culture shock. I'm like, yeah, you got it, and the area, like the area where it's situated, and you get to the beach in no time, you get to the mountains in no time, and again, it was the people. I mean, the people in this area are wonderful.
But it wasn't nice on the ice around that time in hockey. The running joke when I moved here and heard about the IceCaps was you'll go to a fight and a hockey game will occasionally break out. I mean, I looked at this old story. It's funny. It's very difficult to find old IceCaps stories on the internet.
Yeah.
Shout out to Paul Strand, who played with the IceCaps in the last season. He actually brought me a scrapbook that actually had photocopied Al Myatt News and Observer stories about the IceCaps. But that's really all you can really do to find old IceCap stuff.
Yep.
Back in the day. But I'm reading this. Raleigh defender Brent Duncan got into the holiday spirit 2:30 into the game when he decked the hall, accidentally nailing linesman Dana Hall with a left hook while exchanging greetings with Roanoke right wing Jason Clark. This is from the Roanoke Express. I'm sorry, the Roanoke Times when you played Roanoke Express in December of 1995, it seems. I'm sorry, December of 1994.
Yep.
So, what was the game at that level at that time?
So, it was, again, this league itself was a development league, and it was one of these leagues where you had a little bit of everything. You had skilled guys. You had a lot of guys trying to make it as your third, fourth line fighters. And like I said earlier, each team had 3 or 4 guys that were there for that purpose.
Okay.
Right? So thank God I wasn't one of them, but we had a handful of them.
Okay.
So, it's just part of the game back then. There was more clutching and grabbing. The stuff you see today, by far, were not penalties back then. And one of the funniest stories I share still today is we we used to have to go to Newton Southwest over in Cary after the games. It was a sponsor of ours, and same thing. They feed you in the booster clubs, and
sure.
You meet and greet and have a beer. So we get there, and we just played probably one of the best games we've ever played. 2-1 win, I think maybe overtime. It was great, great hockey. It was against another team, and we get to the bar and having a beer, and I can't remember who it was, but he's like, something to the effect of, I said, hey, that was a great game tonight. He's like, that was the worst hockey game I ever seen. There were no fights tonight. This was crap. I don't want to go to that crap. And I'm like, buddy, that was like the best. So, again, now it's the education part now of like what a real good hockey game is compared to, hey, there weren't enough fights tonight. I'm like, okay. So, but again, that all came over time. But, it was a tough league. I mean, you had to learn to defend yourself for sure. I mean, I got my butt kicked quite a few times, and wasn't my game. I can tell you a story.
Because you weren't a fighter.
No.
That's not what you wanted to do. But sometimes you got to throw gloves, man.
Well, you do. You got to be. I mean, everybody there was able to defend it, but I wasn't a fighter. But we had a line, and this is the craziest night of my getting my butt kicked. We were orange in practice. We called the orange line. Right?
Okay.
So it was me, Wild Goose, and Tomlinson. And then we're playing Greensboro. And we hear these stories later in life because friends were on the other team. So we're beating the crap out of Greensboro, 5-0. Second period, we get a power play. Well, out goes the orange line. We're on the power play. Now, we've already got 4 of the 5 goals, our line. We got 2 Russian kids on defense, Chuchnikov and a kid from Latvia. I can't remember his name right now, but they're on defense. Now, there's not a fighter on the ice.
Okay.
Well, 30 seconds in the power play, we score a goal. All of a sudden, this kid, Brock Woods, comes out of nowhere, grabs Goose, beats the crap out of him. I'm hanging on to another guy. He lets that guy go, comes over, beats Tomlinson up, comes over, beats me up. One guy beat all 3 of us up, and the 2 Russian guys are standing at the point watching us. Hey! So, and it was Halloween night, so we're the orange line. So the pumpkin line got smashed on Halloween night. So 3 of us out of the game. We go downstairs. Goose has a cut in his head. Tomer's nose is across his face. I'm beat up too. We undressed. We're not going back out.
Go back out there.
Kurt comes down at the beginning of the 3rd period. We do the ice, everything, and he's like, "What are you guys doing?" We're like, "We're done. We got 5 of the 6 goals. We just got our butts kicked by one guy.
Yeah.
We're done for the night. They had 3 more lines. Have at it." We took our shit off and stayed in. That's it. And yeah, it was one guy, Brock Woods. And then
This is quintessential minor league hockey to me.
100%. But then it was I'm trying to think. I think it was Mike Lappin's brother was on Greensboro.
Okay.
And before the power play, which we didn't know, Brubaker, I believe, was coaching at the time. Jeff.
Okay.
So Jeff,
I'll have to go back and look that one up.
So Jeff Brubaker, again, this comes from secondhand sources, says if this line gets one more point on you guys, somebody better do something.
Yeah.
And
that was
Brock Woods did something on all 3 of us. One guy.
There's another Triangle team fighting for a chance to win a championship. And it's not basketball, it's hockey. Raleigh's own IceCaps made it to the 2nd round of the playoffs for the Eastern Division title. And the fans have caught the fever.
This is my 3rd game. I got caught up in the excitement of the playoffs. And, it's a little relief from the basketball.
The IceCaps have been playing minor league hockey in Raleigh for 2 years. But some fans have only recently found out how exciting the games can be.
I've seen it on television for so long, but to actually be here and see all the action and see all the excitement, yeah, I like it.
I like all the action and stuff.
It's a lot of fun, huh?
Yeah.
City officials estimate the Raleigh IceCaps provide a $5 million economic impact to this city. And the more they play, the more national recognition this city receives.
We're really pleased that we can, when we play in Ohio or wherever, we've got the name Raleigh accompanying us.
Out-of-town television stations and newspapers report on the Caps, which give Raleigh positive publicity it would otherwise have to pay a lot of money for. Fans have also spent nearly $1 million this year on food and souvenirs while at the games, and that's above and beyond the price of the ticket.
Crowds have been far greater than we ever expected. We had something like 15 sellouts this year, so we're always pleased with the number of fans who show up.
A loss tonight means the end of the IceCaps season, but now that the fans have checked them out, they say they'll be back. Deborah Morgan, WRAL TV5 News, Raleigh.
So going back to that wire story that I found from the Roanoke Times in December of 1994, there's a little info blurb. And it says, IceCaps captain Jim Powers likely out for the season after suffering a knee injury against Greensboro on November 25th in Raleigh. That game has Powers first off the injured list after recovering from a back problem. So this is years of playing, things eventually catching up to you. But that knee injury, just take me back to that time, what you're thinking, what the recovery is, because if I'm looking at your future statistics, you played 13 games in 94-95 because of the injury. You're done, but you only played 18 games the following season.
Yeah. So when I remember the hit, it was at the blue line. Again, we were on a power play, and I was playing the right point, and guy just came out and knee to knee, and my knee popped backwards.
Okay,
I felt it. And I was just like, oh, that hurt. That was different. So it was a PCL, which is an uncommon. You got the ACL common, the MCL's common. The PCL is the one that goes through. So it's not a normal tear.
Okay.
But I tore it. So Lyman Smith, who was with Raleigh Orthopedic, was wonderful. He was actually his mentor was the guy that did Bo Jackson's hip.
Oh, wow. Okay.
If I remember the
Saved
story.
his life.
Yeah, if I remember the story correctly. So Lyman said to me, he goes, I've never done a PCL.
Okay.
He goes, I'd love to do a PCL. He goes, but I've got guys that have done them, but I've never done one, and I'd love to do one. And Lyman has done 10 surgeries on me already. I'm like, have at it. Why not?
You're a guinea pig. Why
and honestly, today, I feel like I made a great choice with that because today it is still as good as it was. I think, when people pay extra, they don't do them every day, you pay extra attention to it. So I think he just did that so well that he wanted to do it so well, and it's been great, and knock on wood, I haven't had an issue since.
Did you know that was it?
Nope.
Nope.
Nope. I didn't know at that point. I was rehabbing, probably the most painful rehab I've ever done in my life.
Okay.
Flo Moses, who owned, she's part of Raleigh Orthopedic at the time, but then she had her own place after that. She was our rehab lady, and she was wonderful. She was tough as nails and pushed you. So I'm over at the clinic, and she puts me on the Ubi, which is that bike that you try to, ride. And
yeah, I'm familiar with that one.
So the Ubi I'm going on, and I can't get around. So she goes, all right, come on. Jump on the bed over there, and let me stretch it out. And she jumped on my knee. She got it to move the scar tissue was just there, and I wasn't breaking through it on my own. Basically, she knew it, I knew it, but I didn't know she was going to do it. And today was the worst pain I've ever had in my life.
Jeez.
I mean, tears on a table going, oh, my God. Caught my breath. She gave me an ice pack. She goes, we broke through. I'm like, yeah, we broke through all right. So after that, I started getting my my range of motions, and everything was good. But then I came back for camp, and, I was a step and a half off.
Yeah.
And I knew it. That's when I knew it.
That's when
I thought I'd be, get okay, and it wasn't. Couldn't get there.
So you transitioned to like a player/assistant at this point.
Yeah, so I retired, and Kurt said, come on the bench and coach with me for, I think I did for a year with him. And it was great. I mean, it was fun.
But you didn't pursue it after that. You were done?
I was staying here.
Okay.
Right? And I was staying here, and I because of my injury back in the day, we were just getting the PHPA involved in the ECHL.
Okay.
I was actually myself and a guy named Jimmy Mill. I don't know if you remember. Jimmy Mill was one of our goalies.
Oh, so there was no association at this point.
Well, we were developing it as we were playing.
Okay.
So I took a role, and Millsy took a role, and we went to the meetings in Florida. And we were actually, it's funny, we had a standoff with the ownership group at one point about the PHPA getting in. So one of the older vets, you only allowed 3 vets. So one of the guys, John Blessman, I think it was, he collected all of our skates one game. Said, we're not playing tonight.
Oh, wow.
It was a big standoff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of PHPA and getting them established into the East Coast. So Millsy and I were representatives here in Raleigh, and every other team had 2 guys, and we all converged in Florida and had the meetings and got it going, actually. Okay. So that wasn't a real big liking from the ownership group.
I would imagine.
Which I get. It's business. I get it. But
I mean, there's always been look, even today, there's a consistent point of friction between ownership, players, and the cut of the money.
100%.
So that will always exist.
Yeah. So when this knee went out, the beginning of PHPA was here. So I had that assistance.
Okay.
So keeping that assistance was not going to allow me to get on the bench next year. I can promise you that.
Yeah,
so,
true.
Yeah.
True,
so
true,
it became a little bit of a pissing contest, if you will. So, after that, I stayed here. I had a hockey school for quite a few years, getting involved with all the youth programs, teaching kids in the area, and still doing it today.
I was going to say that, and that's a nascent time for hockey.
Yeah.
Which kind of gets to the larger point. We can close on this. How much pride or thought do you give to the fact that the IceCaps really did just help establish a beachhead, if you will, for hockey that eventually brought the Carolina Hurricanes to this market? And I mean, look, the IceCaps were a casualty of that. They played one season concurrently. Well, they were here in Raleigh while the Hurricanes played that inaugural season in Greensboro, and then they were off to Augusta.
Yep.
But how do you view that time and the people who became hockey fans through the IceCaps, and it translated over the Hurricanes in that first season?
So let's go back to your first question about the AHL. My conversation with Bruce Landon. I swear this is my own theory, but this has something to do, in my opinion, on how this all came to be. Bruce Landon again wanted me to go to Louisville. And he was in Springfield.
Okay.
And we were affiliated at the time with the New Jersey Devils with Lou Lamoriello and that crew. That's how Kurt got here. He was a New Jersey guy too. And I was talking to Bruce Landon, and he said, "All right, I'll send you to Raleigh, but tell me about Raleigh. Why is it so good?" And we had a long conversation, more in depth, And I just honestly, in my heart, I think there's a tie there because the next 2 or 3 years we affiliated with Springfield.
Okay.
So some of our guys actually got called up. Brad Malahy got called up. I think Goose got called up. Goose might have went to Providence. Anyway, I don't remember exactly who went where, but we made an affiliation now with Springfield and New Jersey. So we became a little bit of a feeder program. So obviously their guys came down here. They loved it. We loved it. And then, obviously Hartford becomes the Hurricanes, and they moved down here.
There you go.
I don't know if it has anything to do with it, but in my world, it's like,
hey, it helps.
Cool.
Every
for
little
sure.
bit helps.
For
Every
sure.
little bit helps. When did you start Pipers?
Oh, God, 2001, December of 2000, we went in.
So you wrap things up hockey-wise in 96.
Yeah.
You're doing these hockey schools.
Yep.
What, you're obviously sticking around here,
Yeah.
and now you're thinking, what am I doing next?
Yeah, so I'm not leaving.
You're not leaving?
No, I'm here. I loved it here. I'm not leaving. I'm not going home. I was in a medical business selling practice management software for about 3 years.
Okay.
Single, can do it on a plane 2 times a day.
Sure.
Yep, I was in charge of the East Coast from basically Boston down to Florida somewhere, and I was on a plane every day. And then, I did 3 years of that. It gets kind of old, and I'm not getting any younger, and it's just like, oh my God, what am I doing here? So I lived up in North Raleigh, and I was still teaching at the time, and I was teaching this guy's kid, and he was in the restaurant business at the time. And sure enough, I said, hey, I got this place I'd like to look at and maybe get into it. And we knocked on the door, talked to the owner, is it for sale? Everything's for sale. All right, what's the number? Let's go. And,
okay.
And that was it.
Yeah.
That's how we walked in and
just bought the Piper's Tavern.
Bought it. It was Manchester's at the time.
Yes.
And then we operated first 6 months just as is, and then we started establishing our own little thing.
A lot of memories at Piper's Tavern.
Yeah,
man. A lot of memories. at least for me, back in. It's funny because this is where Raleigh ends up being a big little town in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Because when I first started at 850 The Buzz, we spent a lot of time at Piper's Tavern back in the day. Solarte would hang out at Piper's Tavern as well. Goldeneye would hang out. So it's just kind of funny how these little paths cross and whatnot. And the the IceCaps jersey that is in the restaurant makes a whole heck of a lot of sense when I go back. Obviously, I put 2 and 2 together later on, but I was always like, oh, hey, look, a little memorabilia. Because it was the same thing at the old Blinko's Sports Bar, which used to be across the street.
Old Jim. I know Jim well.
Oh, yeah, man. Yeah. Blinko, I hope Blinko's doing all right. I haven't heard from Blinko in ages. Yeah. I think he went back up to Buffalo.
He's up in Buffalo.
So he was in the same boat, Buffalo guy, loved hockey, and he had IceCaps jerseys all
over the place.
All throughout. So the IceCaps memory doesn't go away for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And what I always find interesting is that your first jersey actually had the dome on it.
Yep.
Before it switched over to just the IceCap logo that most people see. But the original logo was an actual – it looked like Broughton.
Yeah.
It looked like the Broughton Caps in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. You got any more of that gear lying around?
So I got a couple of the shirts that are framed upstairs. I was looking for something to put on, like a shirt. And it's 30 years ago.
Yeah, it ain't fitting.
It was beyond fitting. I think the mothballs got to it or something. I don't know. I couldn't find it. I had a hat. I'm like, that thing is terrible looking. So, but the dome. I remember the campaign, and I think they put a thing out, and you won maybe season tickets if you were the one that they picked. So, the lady that designed that I was there when they did it and they unveiled it. It was pretty cool. It was a neat little. The second one I like a lot better than the first one.
The Raleigh IceCaps really made great inroads to create new hockey fans in this market and helped pave the way for the arrival of the Carolina Hurricanes. Ironically, that success also meant that the IceCaps had to move.
Anytime a new tenant comes to town, it has an effect. With the Whalers moving to North Carolina, the Raleigh IceCaps will exist no more when their big brothers move to town. But the Caps can take pride in the fact that they were the ones that broke the ice for hockey in the area.
I like to think that the IceCaps had a hand in this, obviously, yeah.
Once you start something and it gets bigger and bigger, obviously if you started it, you paved the way, and that's what they started 6 years ago.
NC State will have to share its new arena with the new hockey team, but instead of sulking, the Wolfpack family sees the Hartford move as a kickstart to build their long-awaited new arena.
This is something that we're going to have to live with because we're living in that type of community here. It's either now or later, and so let's look at it as progress and work together and make it a very successful venture for everyone.
Well, everyone was backslapping and all smiles today on the site of the new arena. What we have to remember is we won't see a face-off here in Raleigh until 1999. Jeff Gravely, WREL TV5 Sports.
Paul Strand has long been part of the youth hockey community here in the Triangle. He was also part of the last Raleigh IceCaps team. Paul is like so many other people who have come here for various reasons, and in this case hockey, falls in love with the area, and then they want to make it a place they can call home. So you're coming out of Western Canada. The goal always is to make the NHL, but the journey to get to the NHL can take all sorts of twists and turns, and sometimes you just never make it. So you're coming out of youth hockey, you're trying to become a professional. What was that early part of the journey like for you?
Well, for me, coming out of youth hockey, I wasn't highly touted. I grew up in northern Alberta, and I managed to make it to junior, and even that after it was a little bit rough. I went to the University of Alberta, and slowly, first year at the University of Alberta, I wasn't one of the top players, and after 5 years, I just kind of developed. So I was a late bloomer, and got to the end of my Canadian college career, and I was a hometown addition, I think, to the Edmonton Oilers, tryout roster.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
And it was a great surprise, but I went into the camp, in really good shape. I took it seriously, but it was like, I knew I was a long shot.
What is the level of difference from trying to skate at an NHL level when you're doing that tryout versus the ECHL or even the AHL, at that matter?
Honest truth, I tell people, like, it was some of the easiest hockey I actually played was at was at the Edmonton Oilers camp. I mean, you're playing with guys who know exactly what they're doing.
Mhm.
So if you have that understanding of the game, you can play some really easy hockey. You know, if you give the guy the pass, you're going to get it back if you stay in the right. The problem is that these guys are at such a high level. That was a training camp, right? There was at that, and so eventually, when the game gets tougher, they're taking your time and space away. But in terms of the keeping up with the guys, it was actually very easy, just because you're in the right place at the right time, right? But again, you got to take that with it's training camp hockey. When we started to play in the exhibition games against the other team's minor league guys, it got a little bit tougher, right? It was tougher, but it was still very interesting that it was.
But you didn't give up. You wanted to keep plugging away. So you do what you got to do. So you're playing at the lower levels.
Yeah.
But this is a grind, man. Do I have this right? You played on 9 different teams in 7 years?
I did, and probably mostly because of my personality, I'm sure. You know.
All right, please explain what you mean by your personality.
Well, you know, I don't always keep my mouth shut with stuff, right? And I think that you know, you always kind of think that you're doing it for the right reasons. I think even going through it, you think that you're this, but ultimately there's stuff guys on your team want to hear, or coaches, you know, they don't necessarily want you to hear. I mean, how I got to Raleigh from Baton Rouge was, you know, one of those typical scenarios.
Okay.
I get down to Baton Rouge and I'm playing for Dave Schultz, and he tells us in practice, you know, this is the Dave the Hammer Schultz, right? And he tells us in practice we're not allowed to take slap shots.
Okay.
And as a pro hockey player, I never thought I'd ever hear that. And so the next game, I'm on the power play in the penalty kill, and I take a slap shot, miss the net, and all you hear is him yelling, "Get off the ice!" And he actually called me Mr. Slapshot. So I go to the bench.
Oh man.
Yeah, and I sit the rest of the game. And
okay.
So that was fine. And the next game we're playing in Tallahassee, and it's late in the game, and we're down by a goal, or it's a tie game or something like that. I can't remember the exact. And the goalie goes out to the corner to throw the puck up the boards, falls down, going back to the net. I pick up the puck off the boards, and I wind up to take a slap shot, and all that go through my head is, I'm going to get in trouble.
Mr. Slapshot.
So I tried to turn it into a wrist shot. I screwed up, and goalie managed to get back, and I threw my stick on the bench, and I was traded the next day.
You were traded the next day, and you end up with the Raleigh IceCaps.
The Raleigh IceCaps.
In the final year of their existence. Did you know that things were wrapping up for the IceCaps when you got traded to them 10 games into the season?
I had no idea. I heard that they were interested, and then the head coach was a guy named Dan Wiebe, who played at the University of Alberta. I didn't know him personally at that point, but
you got that connection.
You got the connection. So I gave him a call, and he says, "Well, I'll tell you the truth. You need a defenseman." And I said, "I can play defense." I just wanted out of Baton Rouge, and I wanted to go to a place, and so he said, "Sure." So I came up here and I played defense for the first 4 games, and but I had no idea. It wasn't something that I would have paid attention to going into the season. I mean, I even during the summer I wasn't really looking at the East Coast Hockey League. I was focused on the NHL stuff, and even though I knew I was in tough, that's what you focus on.
That's what you're focused on. What do I got to do to get an opportunity to play in the NHL? So you arrive to the IceCaps. The way it's always been explained to me, having moved here in 1995, is that the IceCaps were a hell of a fun time. It was a cheap night to go out, drink some beer, and I think the joke was typically you would go to a boxing match and a hockey game would occasionally break out. Is that a fair characterization of what a night was like at Dorton Arena?
You know what, Dorton Arena was very exciting to play at. Even in that last year, where a lot of fans were going out to Greensboro to watch the games out there. The fact is I mean, and the East Coast was a pretty tough league at that point. I mean, not that it's not a tough league now, but I'm talking more from a standpoint of there's a lot more fighting back then.
Sure.
You look at the rosters, there was a lot more guys with 200-300 penalty minutes on most rosters and things like that. So there was a fight. We had some tough guys on that team too, and there were some fights, pretty well every night. So, and then people did drink in the stands.
Of course. Of course. So, what were the conditions like at a place like Dorton Arena for, in all your travels and all your stops? What Because I know Dorton Arena is a place that had its heyday. It was already old in 1997 and out of date in 1997. So from your perspective, what were the facilities like at that point? What was the ice like at that point?
So of course, just the structure itself is a different building. I mean, it's probably the most unique building I've played in.
Yes.
Just the structure, right? And we had a hard time sometimes on Sunday nights when we had the midday games, the sun coming up. Or the sun going down. Sorry, the sun going down, and
because of all the windows.
Yeah, the windows.
And you could open a window too.
Yeah. Sometimes we may have done that. But it was like one game we had to delay the game because the sun was. It was the time of day we were doing it, and the sun was basically coming through, and so that was a strange thing to it, right? Of course, in Dorton, you're also. It's a 10 feet moat there around for the rink, right? So where the seats were, so the fans are a little bit further away. So that was an interesting part because I hadn't played in a rink like that as well. The ice was fine. I'm unusual though myself. I never really noticed the ice. I've always kind of said, hey, everybody's got to play on the same ice. So what can you do, right? So the interesting part was even. Because there wasn't so much done in Baton Rouge. The very first game, I remember coming up the stairs from the dressing room, and one of the guys go, I couldn't understand what he's saying. He says, "Yeah, I think it's going to be a cowbell night."
A cowbell night.
Yeah, and I was like, "What the heck is he talking about?" And we come out, and sure enough, there's 15, 20 cowbells in the stands, right? And it was more of a joke he was saying about the fans and things like that. Yeah. But it was just, it was the first time I saw. Or heard a bunch of cowbells. And
Interesting. Yeah. Well, and I guess that kind of ties back to, again, you're coming from Western Canada. You're immersed in a hockey culture that is relatively new here, okay? And it took a while for the Carolina Hurricanes to actually gain traction. I mean, there were some cringeworthy moments where they were trying to market the Carolina Hurricanes in a way that would appeal to what they thought were Southern fans. I'll never forget Richard Petty, the king of NASCAR. And like having a Zamboni in his car and things like that, trying to tie these things together. I always thought that was the silliest thing. So I can only imagine when you are playing in Baton Rouge, or there's probably more focus on what LSU is doing in football than they are in what's going on with hockey. Same here. It's a basketball town. People are more interested in what's going on with NC State, Carolina, and Duke. So did you find it frustrating, or did you find it almost a blessing in that, hey, you can kind of blend in and nobody knows you play hockey for the most part and you can just kind of do your thing?
I think the only frustrating thing we had that first year is Glenwood Avenue wasn't around yet. That was about it. We would drive out to Chapel Hill to try to figure out where we could go. But from a standpoint of the game, I never heard anybody frustrated by anything. Like, doesn't matter the number of fans we had in the stands or things like that. You just wanted to play, right? And you enjoyed the fact that you were playing. I think that's the thing is most guys who play in the minor leagues and a place like that are happy to be playing.
They just want to play.
They're playing. There are very few guys that continue to play on that don't just love playing, right?
Yeah.
So you're not really thinking about what your fan situation is like or where the team's going the next year or anything like that. It was just basically, hey, we get to play today.
The one thing that I've always picked up in talking to guys who spend a lot of time in the minor leagues is there's a lot of cutting up time. There's a lot of just hanging out and things like that. I mean, we talking hangover hockey games here at Dorton Arena on occasion?
Maybe hangover practices.
Hangover practices.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of time, and truth be told, there's a lot of reasons why some guys are still in the minor leagues. Right,
work ethic, right?
I mean, it's probably because you do spend too much time doing that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, it never really affected. I mean, I don't remember it affected me more in college than it did.
Okay.
Playing in pro hockey, right? So
you brought this 1997-1998 scrapbook. From the Raleigh IceCaps, and this was pretty much it. It has 1991 through 1998. because at this point, with the Carolina Hurricanes coming to town, they were moving to Augusta, Georgia. After that, it just the two things could not exist at the same time, and it made a lot of sense. And the Charlotte Checkers were far enough away that the Canes could have an association. Well, they had an association with the Charlotte Checkers for a very, very long time before they moved their affiliation with the Chicago Wolves of the AHL, which most people understand now. So, did you look at the Canes moving here as maybe, or any of the guys on the IceCaps, maybe viewed as an opportunity of, hey, look, we're here and we've been playing hockey here. We kind of get the area, and there's an NHL team moving here. Kind of like you in Edmonton, being back in Western Canada. Did you think, hey, maybe I'll try out with the Canes? Did you ever try out with the Canes?
No. I mean, I don't think it's something that the guys that are playing would think that way when they're in that minor league. Like we were, I think we had Vancouver and New Jersey were our affiliates at that time. Yes. So we had a bunch of guys that were signed with New Jersey and or sent down from Vancouver. There's guys who'd come down and get their either conditioning, or they were there for the whole. They were signed by those teams and they'd be down. So that was always the focus with that.
Okay.
Most of the other guys who aren't signed with those, but they're hoping to get called up by somebody.
But just anybody.
That doesn't matter, right?
Okay.
And you're just like, yeah, hopefully I'll put in something and somebody will need me that day. But the other guys are, most of those East Coast League teams had NHL affiliates that they're with, right? And that's where they're, we had guys who were going up and down, Joaquin Gage and who ended up playing for Edmonton a few years later and things like that. Though that's what you're kind of looking at.
It's funny going through the scrapbook. Fans will remember certain things like the mascot and the fact that you could have cheap beer and whatnot. Or who was it? Was it Cappy, the mascot of the Raleigh IceCaps? As I'm flipping through this, he's got his own little profile page and everything else. When you're playing, do you, even when coming from Baton Rouge and the funny names, you're coming off of the Kingfish, right? Did you keep any of this old gear from back in the day?
Well, you do for a while,
yeah,
and then it just gets worn out, right? Like
okay,
I had a ice cap bag for the longest time,
yeah,
which they didn't want you to take. I mean, most teams didn't. I mean, I think the IceCaps were fine with it because they were leaving, but I still think,
what are we going to do with this stuff, right?
Minor league guys especially, they find a way to put lots of stuff in their bag for the summer, summer stock stuff, right? So
yeah,
I have jerseys from a bunch of the teams. That year, they let us buy one, and they raffled off another one, and then I
hold up, you had to buy your own jersey? You just couldn't take a jersey?
Yeah, well, they tried to make as much money on that last thing as they could. So they would raffle off the one jersey,
yeah,
like because we had the raffle off for the one off, like the military nights and stuff. They would do that, and then they at the end of the year you had a home and away, and they would raffle one of them off. And then you had the ability to buy your other one for $100. So I think there was a Booster Club member who wanted it, so I let them. They gave me the $100, and I bought it, and they have it. I wish I could go back and get it, but yeah, they didn't.
Hold up, a Booster Club?
Yeah, we had a great Booster Club. Raleigh had a. When you showed up, they came over and they gave you pots and pans for your apartment and stuff like that. And
how much were you making that year with the IceCaps?
Well, in town, that's a whole other story. I started making $650
a week,
and so I showed up. I told you I'd play. I said I'd come play defense, and I did. I felt I did very well, and then I moved. I played a couple games forward. So I played the first 2 games on defense, and then 2 games on forward. And I came in and I saw that I was in the gray jersey, and I go.
What did that mean? You're in the gray.
You weren't playing that night.
Okay.
And so I basically I got put on waivers. And,
okay.
Yeah, so I got put on waivers, and I'm talking to the coach. Again, he was a U of A guy, so I'm talking to him. I'm in his office, and I'm sitting there, and we're talking about stuff. And over the course of the conversation, he had made mention. He goes, "Yeah," he goes, "They think you're making too much money." because
$650 a week, you're making too much money. We got to get rid of this guy.
Well, as a first-year guy, I just got traded from Baton Rouge. I didn't start off very well. I had 3 points in 10 games in Baton Rouge, and I get to come here, and even though I had got a couple points and was playing, I mean, I played quite a bit in those first games, but $650 a week was a lot of money for a rookie coming out of, it's not what the league minimum I think was $350 at the time, and so basically. We're sitting there talking, and I just kind of hit me. I said, "So this is about money," and so he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "They're thinking you're making too much money," and I said, "Well," I go, "Why didn't you just tell me that?" I said, "I would have taken a pay cut." I go, "I got 5 points." I go, "I'm not in a position to."
Like, who am I? Like, what am I going to say?
I said, it's much better than, because guys would bug me later on down the road. Oh, you go on waivers one day, you get traded. Like, guys would use those as carve-ups on the ice, right?
Yeah.
And so we went to, it's called the Goat.
Yes.
So he goes, well, why don't we go
for bar, right? Yeah. For those who are not familiar with the Goat, it's off of Western Boulevard. It's been there for a long time. Yeah.
So it's next to. There's a restaurant there.
It's the old Pam's Farmhouse.
Yeah, so he goes, well, why don't we go for lunch? He goes, why don't we go for lunch? He goes, you'd stay and play? He goes, if we paid you less money? But I was already on waivers, so I had to clear waivers.
Sure.
So he goes, well, why don't we go for lunch? So he goes, meet me over at Pam's. We'll go to Pam's Farmhouse, and we waited for me to clear waivers, which was at noon. And as soon as we cleared waivers, I re-signed for $450, and
it was a matter of $200 a week.
That's it. Yeah, that's $800 a month, and and so it.
So, okay, now the Booster Club makes a hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah, well,
because you're not making that much money. They're trying to save money. Because when I think Booster Club, I'm thinking high school athletics. I'm thinking Wolfpack Club or the Rams Club. These are things where your fans, your alum, they're out here raising money to be competitive. I can't imagine that. Like the Canes have a quote-unquote Booster Club. But that always just felt like you're buying access to things. You're not necessarily trying to support the players. I don't think my neighbor, Sebastian Aho, needs the help. He has a nice fat contract, right? So, or this is not like the Holly Springs Salamanders, which is an instructional baseball league, and guys are living with families as they're trying to work their way up. So you had Raleigh residents, fans, helping you out.
Helping us out, people who I'm really good friends with today.
Yeah.
There's a guy named Schaefer O'Neill who's been a season ticket holder for the IceCaps for almost their entire time, and he's got a bunch of a whole mess of seats with the Hurricanes now. Right on and he's been a season ticket holder since day one out in Greensboro out there, and he's a guy that I would come back and I would live at his house in the summertime, and I would paint houses and do stuff in the summertime here, and I go play somewhere else, and I stay with him, and the people who bought jersey, they were my Booster Club family.
Okay,
they were called the Spencers, Mary and Gil Spencer, and they. They would take you for dinner, and they would, help out. There were people that we would actually have to meet under, and I say have to. I loved it. I mean, I think that comes from my dad. We would have to at the end of the games go to this room where you get a couple tickets to have some beer, and all the Booster Club members would be there.
Yeah, a little holding area. Yeah. If you go to PNC Arena right now, sometimes season ticket members will have this like opportunity where they, where the Zamboni hangs out, the back in the garage, where you can have a little bit of access with the players before they bounce.
Yeah, and
so you would do that.
Yeah, we would do that. You'd have to make an appearance, and then some of the, you get some of the kids who, I don't think they quite understood that the business, right? Like these are the people who technically pay your.
Gotcha.
And that's kind of what I learned. I'd learned from my dad in the junior days and things like that. That you have fans and stuff like that. But you'd go down, you'd have a beer or two with them, and I was always one of the last to leave because people would buy you more. And there were guys who.
This is what leads to the hangover practice.
Well, exactly. Because then you're trying to go out and. It's interesting. Those are some of the things I remember the most. I mean, there was one guy who would, he'd give me a $20 handshake every game, right? Like you'd be in there, and he'd just come up to you, and things like that. I had one game where I I ended up scoring 5 goals, and he came up and gave me $100, right, and said 1 for each goal, right, and those are the things that you I'm sure there's stories all over the place,
sure.
and of things like that, and there's the thing I remember most though is a guy who was serving the beer, and he just wanted enough tips. To go down to I'd never been to a Waffle House in my life growing up, right?
So you went to that one on Hillsborough Street?
That was the one, and he would go. That was the first one. When I first moved to town, I go, I'll never go to a Waffle House. I was at that Waffle House nonstop. So
I was going to say, looking at the time frame, I have a feeling that you and I might have been at that Waffle House at the same time between 1997 and 1998, because that's when I was at NC State as a freshman.
Yeah,
so I have a feeling that we might have crossed paths at one point without realizing it, having hash browns smothered and covered with some really battery acid coffee.
Yeah. I couldn't understand. He was always like, I just need enough to get me that steak and eggs.
Dude,
and
those steak and eggs will hit, man, at the right time of night. IceCaps move on. You hit a bunch of different teams. You could have lived anywhere else, man. You could have gone back to Canada.
Yeah.
So what the hell brought you back here?
Well, this is another story I tell everybody. Baton Rouge was muggy.
Mm-hmm.
It was not, Baton Rouge is different. Like I was supposed to, at one point, there's a possibility I wish I would have went to New Orleans because it was tied with Edmonton. It was another mistake that we don't need to totally get into unless you want to. But Baton Rouge was a bigger, it's a bigger spread out city. Like it doesn't have the New Orleans, feel to it.
Right.
And interesting, you had brought up, LSU. That was the year that I think Notre Dame beat LSU, and I mean that's the one thing I remember. Everybody rushing the field and things like that. So, but Baton Rouge wasn't something I fell in love with.
Okay.
And I got picked up at the airport here in Raleigh, and it was close to the end of November, and I was in a car, and the windows were down, and the guy was taking me to it's a Holiday Inn now, or the big round.
Oh yeah, no, it was a Holiday Inn at that time, and they're actually getting ready to tear it down.
Okay, are they?
Yeah.
So that's where I was staying for the first 10 days 2 weeks that I was here.
Okay.
So he was taking me down Hillsborough Street, and I had the window down, and the weather.
Mm-hmm.
And November,
mm-hmm.
It was so nice at 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock. It was later in the evening that I was coming in, and I literally said to myself, I could live here the rest of my life.
Okay.
And so that first year, they give you 2 weeks to get out of town, or they don't pay for it. So at the end of the year, that's the rule on the East Coast. They have 2 weeks. If you stay past 2 weeks, then they won't. They don't have any obligation to pay for your flight home.
Gotcha.
So I left within 2 weeks. I got home. I was back in Canada for maybe 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching some hockey. I bought my buddy's car. I drove back. I said, I'm going to go back.
You're going to come back here?
Get back to Raleigh, and even with no idea that there was no team going to be here, right? I just knew I wanted to live down here.
So you started getting involved with youth hockey at that point?
No, it was still a few years.
Still a few years.
Yeah, there were.
When did you start getting involved with the youth hockey?
So at the end of my career, close to it, I ended up getting traded to Greensboro.
Okay.
And I got hurt. I got a head injury, a stick in the head, and that was near the end of the year. It was February. I get into the summer. I called the local youth hockey program out there, and I said, "Hey, I'm an ex-pro here, played here. I'm willing to come out to anybody." And
sure.
There was only one. That's when I first got into the youth business and realized how some of it could be, because there was only one out of the Greensboro had 265 kids in their program. They had a really big program at the time, and only one team said yeah.
Okay.
Everybody else didn't really want you to. There were a lot of parent coaches, and they were worried, I think, in my mind, that at the time, if I'm thinking about it, that they didn't want somebody else coming on and telling them what to do or that kind of thing, whether they knew that that's what you were going to do regardless. So I started coaching U18 out there, and then with the president of the association was a lady named Nancy Gunn. She said, "Why don't you come down to the Carolina Amateur Hockey Association you see year-end meeting, and very quickly I was on their board, and then it just kind of snowballed from there.
How far has youth hockey in this area come along now that you're part of it in the last, say, 15 years?
Well, I could take full credit for it, but it's the Hurricane. I mean, that's ultimately the Carolina Hurricanes and NHL teams. They drive everything about the youth development.
But the Hurricanes were not exactly on board with that in the earlier days with youth hockey, right? I mean, to me, logically, it would make sense that the professional hockey team in the market would want to develop new fans and grow the game. That's always part of a league's mission. They always tell you they want to grow the game. They want to be a part of the community. All the talking points, right? But you actually were part of an interesting meeting in the early days with the Carolina Hurricanes and how their association with youth development was going, and you were a little outspoken in that meeting. What was going on?
Well, I mean, I agree with you 100% on where the NHL teams should be. I mean, Dallas did it. They built a bunch of rinks. They went down into that area. They built a bunch of rinks, and their youth program was one of the strongest growing programs in the first few, because they knew, okay, if you play hockey, there's a better chance you're going to go to watch the games. It's the one sport where that correlates. You know, if you're a hockey player, you'll go. And so when I got done playing and was on that, there was a desire to have the brand of the Hurricanes, to push some learn to play programs. That was it. It was actually a local program. We said, we could maybe get more kids playing if we brand the learn to play programs at a minimum, because there were competing organizations. And of course, for the Hurricanes, they did have some background in that, in the youth hockey business. I mean, Jim Rutherford and Karmanos were part of the Wars of Detroit in the early, so they were reluctant from that standpoint to get involved, right?
Yeah, for those who might not, for as much as Peter Karmanos might get dinged for his frugal nature as an owner of the Carolina Hurricanes, Karmanos and Illich, the owner, Mr. Pizza, in Detroit with the Red Wings, a lot of that was based on youth hockey, and Karmanos is in the Hockey Hall of Fame for a lot of his contributions to youth hockey. So I always found that interesting that it didn't necessarily translate here.
Yeah, and I think they were just reluctant because I think Jim Rutherford was probably on the ground floor, so I never had any discussions with him about that. What I'm assuming that there were a lot of stuff that was done
in the Detroit days.
In the Detroit. So from that, there was that reluctance, I think, to get involved, because they knew that, okay, we have this program and we have this program that are competing against each other from a youth standpoint. If we brand one or the other, then the other might not come to our hockey games.
Sure.
And they weren't really having the ability to be able to pick and choose who their fan base was going to be at that point.
This is true, yes.
Which I've learned more after I became an employee, right? And, at the time, I just was like, why don't you put your put
your damn logo on something and let's go.
So
right? I mean, that would make sense to me. I mean, I'm coming at it from the same perspective. I did not realize the politics behind the scenes about youth hockey. Although now I am as of the recording of this podcast, my 11-year-old son has been a part of the Canes youth development, from the Polar Ice House leagues to now having made a junior Canes team, and I'm learning the interesting politics at play with these types of things. I just want to go to the Wake Competition Center, drink a Storm Brew, and watch my kid play. But if you really want to get involved, man, it can get interesting. But it was like that back then too.
It was. I mean, the East Coast Eagles at the time was a youth program that basically had some very good travel teams, and the Raleigh Youth Hockey Association also had some quality hockey programs, and there was a worry that if you brand one or the other, that was a problem. So there was a meeting that was taking place. I was on the Carolina Amateur Hockey Association board as the youth committee chair at that time, and the Raleigh Youth Hockey Association president said, "Hey, why don't you come down and we're going to be meeting." It was during the lockout. It was during the lockout time. So
it's like 2005.
Yeah, there was no NHL being played at the time, and he said we got
2004, 2005 time frame.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was January of that year
that
we had the meeting and of 2005, And he said, "Why don't you come on down?" And we're gonna Jason Carmanos and Doug Wharf, who was the director of
the
promotions,
the kids or the Canes and Community Foundation and promotions and things like that.
Yeah,
so.
At that time he was still the marketing.
Yeah.
You know that and so they were there and they just hummed and hawed about putting their name on a learn to play program. Right?
Sure, yeah, which is incredibly successful. Shane Willis does a great job of taking that to all sorts of cities in North Carolina now. I mean, all the way down to Wilmington, for heaven's sake.
And at the time, they didn't really do anything. Right?
Okay.
And that was it. It was like, okay, well, you know, and this was just the learn to play. So we weren't even talking about separating the two organizations that were in town.
Yeah.
And this is where my penchant for getting traded came into thing, where I said, hey, you know what, can I say something? And basically I tore into him about the fact that every kid wants to play for the NHL team.
Yeah.
And you guys could change a lot of things. And again, this was my infancy too with it, is that I didn't realize that just how hard it was to change the entire youth community. But regardless, we put the name on a jersey or something came out of that to where I came to the Hurricanes and we ended up putting the name on a jersey, and
the rest is history.
Yeah.
To wrap up this conversation, what was your favorite part of the IceCaps?
My favorite aspect,
other than getting $100 and a handshake or something like that, or the free beer, but there has to be some fond memory of that time with the IceCaps.
Well, that was my first year pro, right?
Yeah.
So basically, it was such a different atmosphere than college from that standpoint. You got guys who. A big age range. You had 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids, right to some guys who were 35, 36 who played for a long time, right? And I think that from my IceCaps experience, mostly because I knew that this is where I wanted to live, and the fact that I did end up coming back here, so I just remember it as more the getting to know the Raleigh community and getting to know the area, and all my years of pro in the minor leagues all have. It's always the memories of the player, the guys that you have and the different things that you do and go out. But for me, I think because I ended up here and I became a big part of the community, that it was like, okay, that was the formative year of just getting to know this community and how great it is. How, we've
come a long way.
It has, and to be a part of an NHL team that won a Stanley Cup and those kind of things, and having that memories to now where, the youth community and that I'm a part of is as big as it is all over is something that is pretty special.
A brief history of Triangle Sports, sponsored by Copiers Plus, your local office equipment and solutions provider. Take the mystery out of your printing expenses by scheduling your free print audit today at copiers-plus.com.